The family, where we learn to love and live for others. The foundation for a healthy society and the cornerstone of civilization. But today's reality paints a different picture. The challenges we face as a society, crime, drugs, violence, and immorality, are rooted in the breakdown of the family. They threaten the survival of our society and the future of our children. Rebuilding our families is the key to renewing our nation and the world. A movement has emerged to uplift the ideal of marriage and family as the foundation for lasting peace. At its heart is the vision and work of Reverend and Mrs. Sun Myung Moon, who have dedicated a lifetime to making that ideal a reality. Their personal example and teaching have emphasized the fundamental principles that lead to lasting peace. The first and perhaps most difficult is loving one's enemy, for only love can dissolve the hatred that divides us. A deep personal encounter with Jesus at age 15 led Reverend Moon to preach the Word of God in his homeland of Korea. When the communist government began systematic persecution of religion, he was arrested and tortured, spending 3 years at hard labor in the notorious death camp in Humnam. His life was spared when UN forces entered North Korea in 1950 and liberated the Gulag. Knowing the dangers of atheistic communism, Reverend Moon established a global movement for faith and freedom. Educating youth, strengthening the free world's resolve, and reaching beyond the barriers and borders. When the walls came down and the Cold War ended, he invested in the education and development of the former Soviet bloc. Finally, he returned to his homeland and embraced the very man who had sought to destroy him. This bold initiative brought cultural exchange, economic investment, and the warming of North-South relations. Reverend and Mrs. Moon returned to his birthplace for the first time in half a century. In the United States, he faced similar misunderstanding, persecution, and even imprisonment, which rallied religious and political leaders to his defense. Yet he continued to invest in America, supporting a nationwide outreach for interfaith community service, confronting the racial divide, and educating America's leadership.
The prophet is always misunderstood. The masses will not see the vision. And the same thing happened to Martin Luther King, and it's happening to Reverend Moon.
Reverend Moon's message of interfaith harmony threatens the religiously narrow-minded, some of whom have responded with intolerance. Yet he continues to embrace leaders of all faiths, investing himself and the movement to unite the community of faith.
I see him as someone with a vision and with the means to carry that vision out. And he's obviously very strong in his commitment to doing this.
He can love people who do not agree with him. That is very big. We live in a world of small men. There are very few big men, and I mean spiritually big, who can look at someone who may have a faith totally different and sit down with that person, feed that person, talk to that person, love that person.
Another principle lived and taught by Reverend Moon is living for the sake of others. Reverend and Mrs. Moon's personal example of love and service has inspired millions around the world to lead lives of service to humanity. In addition to missions and service projects in 190 countries, programs include interreligious youth united in community service, global relief work, AIDS education, and service for peace. But the heart of Reverend Moon's vision is the family as an instrument of peace. In families, we learn to love, trust, and live for others, the virtues that lead to peace. A global movement for the blessing of marriage seeks to renew the ideal of God-centered families as the owners of true love. Ideal families beyond race, culture, and religion are the model for living together in peace, creating one family of humankind. The movement has drawn like-minded individuals and leaders from every race and nationality, working to implement Reverend Moon's vision of peace under one God. 50,000 religious and civic leaders, diplomats, current and former heads of state have been appointed as ambassadors for peace, proclaiming the values of true love and family, working for peace and reconciliation. A growing movement of interfaith clergy is standing together with Reverend Moon, sharing his calling to rebuild families, restore communities, and renew the nation and world. This movement for peace has grown to embrace every field of human endeavor, including media institutions such as the Washington Times and UPI. The arts, including the Universal Ballet, the New York City Symphony, and the Little Angels. Education, including the University of Bridgeport, Sun Moon University, and elementary and secondary schools around the world. Sports, recreation, and international competition. After a lifetime's effort to build a culture of peace, Reverend Moon is challenging the United Nations to live up to its mission as a global peacemaker. He proposes an interreligious council to address the cultural and religious dimensions of conflict. Ambassadors for Peace have established such peace councils at every level. He brought thousands of these ambassadors to the Middle East, demonstrating the model of peace through interreligious reconciliation, uniting the children of Abraham in the midst of conflict.
I could see the love that the Reverend Sun Moon, that he has for a Palestinian, is no different than the love that he has for a South or North Korean or any human being for that matter. Therefore, I admire the work of this great movement.
Their efforts have established new dimensions of dialogue and cooperation amongst Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. On September 12, 2005, the Universal Peace Federation was launched with the mission of realizing peace for the entire human family. At Lincoln Center in New York City, Father and Mother Moon presented a bold vision for lasting peace. They brought this message of hope to 120 nations in almost as many days, traveling 80,000 miles in the process. They were welcomed by heads of state, international religious leaders, and people of faith on every continent. The World Peace King Bridge Tunnel is a proposal to link an international highway system across the Bering Strait between Russia and North America, connecting the world as a single community. A global tour to bless the family and nation has been launched, led by Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, supported by her 3 eldest sons. Joined by concelebrant clergy, they bring the blessing of God for the renewal of marriage and call each of us to build families of lasting love and genuine peace. Dr. Hak Jahan Moon is a leader in her own right. As the founder of the Women's Federation for World Peace, she has embodied the role of women as peacemakers, sharing this message from the halls of the U.S. Congress to the Kremlin and Beijing's Great Hall of the People. Dr. Moon became one of the first minority women to address the United Nations. Reverend Moon teaches that peace in the world begins from peace in our homes and peace in our hearts. He strives not only for the sake of humanity, but for the liberation of God and the absolute sovereignty of goodness. A homeland where families live in love with God's blessing. It is time for humankind to beat our swords into plowshares. Let us all join together, renewing our commitment to God, to our families, and to the entire human family. Together, we can create a world of lasting peace, in His power, but with our own hands.